Okie dokie. So I have just tried so many false starts to get this going on my Windows computer so that I can have like a nice background and all that stuff. And even though I literally just finished my weekly crypto recap, it just won't stop echoing. I don't know why it won't let me do it. So here we are with my green background, and we've just got a green background now, and that's fine because I really did want to just start this stream and let you all know what's going on with Craig Wright at the moment. He was asked to appear in front of a judge because he was asked to, first of all, provide a list of all the Bitcoin addresses, public addresses that he has. And then he didn't comply by a certain date. And then the judge said he is in there's a risk that he's going to be held in contempt of court for not doing this. And so she said he has to appear in person in court. And today is the day of that hearing, that he is appearing in court. And so much has been happening. Oh my God, I've spent all day just following what's been going on in that courtroom. There are some awesome people who've been live tweeting everything that's been happening. And so I've been following this closely, and it just seems like such a circus. We talked a little bit about what happened during the weekly recap that we just finished. And I mean, there's a lot more that's even happened since then. So I wanted to connect and do this. I thought I'd do it in a live stream because they're always more fun. Let me just pull up the chat so I actually know what's going on in the room there. But it is just like, it's a little crazy what's happening in the courtroom right now. There's so much evasion, and especially like it's a little bit interesting that the judge is really, really not interested in what Craig's story right now, and there's a chance he's going to be held in contempt of court, and there's all this stuff going on, right? And yet he seems to just still be bullshitting his way out of it. So I'll let you guys make up your own mind about what's going on, but I'll just read you what's been happening. So some of my sources, I've got PJM_says on Twitter. You can read through that. Katie Ananina is there and has been tweeting about this. We've got 22nd Century Crypto, or that crypto guy, who's been posting about this as well. Pally, I know that I've retweeted Stefan, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Pally before. He's a lawyer who has been following this in depth. He's been tweeting about it. People have been scouring the internet and then posting threads in Bitcoin Talk forum. So I'm going to be compiling all of those and letting you know across these sources what's been happening in the courtroom and what's going on right now, because it's all a little bit crazy. I still have pulled up my search. Let me just pull up that so that I can see what everyone is writing in the chat, because I hate to not be able to chat with everyone while I'm doing these things. By the way, how terrible is my thumbnail? It's just like they were like, quick, take a thumbnail. So I was like, okay, I'll do that thing. All right, so let's start at the very top. I'm going to start with actually PJM's thread here. So it seems that this person is like really in real time covering what's going on in the courtroom. These are some of the questions that's been asked, and this is happening in Florida at the moment. This is where this trial is happening. So name, Craig Stephen Wright. I thought it was Craig Satoshi Wright. Oh, silly me. No, I'm very much joking. Location, where do you live? UK. Where do you work? Do you work in the US? No. Are you familiar? This is my favorite. This is like a great start to this hearing. Are you familiar with Bitcoin? His answer is Bitcoin, yes. What is called Bitcoin today? No. As if he's not familiar with it. Did he honestly just say that he's not familiar with what is called Bitcoin today? Like, obviously he's familiar with what Bitcoin is today. He's just being a smartass. And for someone who is in jeopardy of being held in contempt of court, this seems like a really stupid way to be going in this courtroom. He's done some stupid things. We'll get to some of those stupid things he's done. But he says, what is called Bitcoin today? No. Somehow he's not familiar with it. He's familiar enough to know that it's not what he considers Bitcoin, but not familiar enough to answer in a courtroom where he's under oath that he's familiar with. Like, I mean, this guy is, I don't know what he's doing right now. Then they say, Satoshi, are you familiar with Satoshi Nakamoto? Yes, this is a character I played, he says. You created Bitcoin was a question. He says, yes. So then they put forward the white paper and they say, did you write this? He says, no, he said, yeah. He says, do you know this? Yes, I wrote it. And then they circle the name of the author where it says Satoshi Nakamoto, and he says, yes, that was my pseudonym. So that's where we're at the moment. And one of the first things I'm going to say about what I'm gathering from reading through everyone's accounts in the courtroom is that, like, case after case after case, people are presenting evidence. He's saying, I've never seen this before in my life. You know, you can't bring this forward. This is a forgery, saying all this stuff. And then the judge or claimant's side is saying, actually, it was your side that put this evidence forward. So that's been happening a lot. We'll go through each of those. So then PJM says, the next question was, in its original design, what was the purpose of Bitcoin? And he says, Bitcoin is the Mandela and small world network where miners acting commercially secure the network without knowledge of the source. There are peer layers on top, IP, and SPV that were later removed in what is known as Bitcoin. Then the question is, do you understand why you're here today? He says, yes, I do. I don't think he does. He is there because the hearing is basically to ascertain whether or not he has complied with the court's orders, which he has not. He was asked to provide all the Bitcoin addresses. He didn't do it. And you'll understand, like, I mean, he gives some answers throughout his testimony that make you think, like, he doesn't understand why he's there, or he would not be saying this stuff because he's really screwed. Like, he's completely screwed himself in his answers. I agree. MZs, if that's how you pronounce it, I think there's something wrong. He may need medical attention. Like, this is just not, I don't know what's going on here, but it's not rational behavior of what he's doing. They say, are you familiar with the term public address? He says, no, that is not part of Bitcoin. The question is, let me reiterate. The question is, are you familiar with the term public addresses? And he says, no. Just out of curiosity, how many people in the chat are not familiar with the term public address? Anyone? And yet apparently Satoshi Nakamoto is not familiar with the term public address. Cool. Just wanted to clarify. So then they say, what are public addresses? I agree, JT. Like, I mean, I don't subscribe to these arbitrary national boundaries, but yeah, the fact that he's Australian, I'm like, no, please don't associate me with that. It's we're not all like that, guys. So then they ask, what are public addresses, contrasted to what you described? And then his answer is that it's like asking, do unicorns relate to this courtroom? I'm so confused. Like, if he is in jeopardy, I'm going to say it again and again, if he's in jeopardy of being held in contempt of court, and his answers are things like, that is like asking, do unicorns relate to this courtroom? Like, he clearly doesn't understand why he's there. Like, yeah, I agree. Caltoro, it is a train wreck. It's such a train wreck. And I'll get on to what Stephen Pally has said. He's just said over and over, like, this guy's so fucked, he doesn't understand, how completely screwed he is. I agree with that. So then they say, you mined the first Bitcoin? And he said, yes, I mined Bitcoin from January 9th to August 2010, which is in a trust. Sorry, January 09. Yeah, I was thinking, like, that wasn't where Bitcoin started. It started on the 3rd of January. But January 09 to August 2010, which is in a trust. He says, the trust holds companies. The companies hold the legal rights to the Bitcoin. They asked, was this the only protective measure? He says, no. This was a way of handling the tax and legal matters. Okay. And then he says, this was done using a hierarchical encryption system for which I later improved and got patented. It was a legal solution to the technical structure. This is what we believe to be the first distributed autonomous corporation. Okay, this is not yet understood by law. The trust was a legal structure wrapper on the DAC. Craig explains the public address concept versus private keys, goes through that, spending owner matters as it relates to private keys. And then he started leaving Bitcoin in August 2010, and he no longer wanted to associate with the Satoshi name. So now I'm going to switch users, someone else who's been covering this, to talk about why he no longer wanted to associate with the Satoshi name. He basically says that he was embarrassed by what Bitcoin had become. They asked him to elaborate, and he says, like, oh, because of Silk Road and Hydra and all of this. He says, I was ashamed of my invention. So first of all, let's just keep in mind that Silk Road didn't come along until 2011, but he started disassociating in 2010. So it was very prescient there in knowing that Silk Road would come along and he would be ashamed of it. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. So let me pull up some of these other things. So Katie Ananina, she has a great thread covering this as well. So apparently she says that when they ask, why did you leave BTC and disassociate with Satoshi? He responds, my invention was used for bad things. He starts crying. Said they created Silk Road and Hydra. It was used to fund child pornography. He explains this after his testimony. He like apparently sobs in his attorney's arms for a while. So that was a thing that went on. Is like really playing up like before the cross-examination, when he was just giving his testimony, it was very much this like, I'm very sad, poor me, I just want to help the developed world. There's Bitcoins, I want to use it to help poor people. I don't like child porn, I don't like the Silk Road, all these are terrible things, I was so ashamed. He's like really selling this whole like this terrible invention type thing. And then during the cross-examination, he just acts like such an idiot. He's just complete, like, and I think Stephen Pally says it best when he says, you can't cry on direct and then be a jackass on cross. And that's a great point. Like on the direct examination, he's like really playing the sympathy card, and then on the cross-examination he's just being a total jackass. So let's go into some of the things that are going there, and I'm going to now switch over to Pally in this. And Pally has also been looking at some of the things going on. So first of all, Carolina Bolado, who I think is in the courtroom at the moment, who's covering this. I agree that this guy's a drama queen. It's thank you, Lewis. I appreciate that. Lovely to see you all in the chat. So Carolina says she kind of goes through all of the information of this. She says that he choked up as he told how he wanted to create a cryptocurrency that did not fall to crime, but that he was unsuccessful in doing this. Others that he worked with started Silk Road and Hydra. Others that he worked with started Silk Road and Hydra, on which drugs, weapons, child pornography are traded and sold. Okay, so number one, he doesn't understand what Silk Road was because child pornography was banned. So that's actually not correct. Weapons were also banned as well on Silk Road. A lot of people don't know that. That's because the mass media has this amazingly well-crafted smear campaign against it. So these are things that Craig does not understand. Second of all, others he worked with. So like if Ross Ulbricht did create Silk Road, is he saying that he worked with Ross Ulbricht? Like that, I don't know. You say some weird stuff in this. So then the cross-examination begins after the break. And Carolina says, just a few minutes into the cross and things are already getting testy, Ira Kleiman's counsel is asking Wright about an email that Kleiman says Wright forged. So if you guys don't know about this document, basically there are documents with signatures that have how you use those electronic signatures and they do the exact same signature on things. It's like a copy and pasted thing. So there's a signature that was used over and over. It just looks like it was copied and pasted. And Ira Kleiman is saying that this is forged on behalf of David, the late David Kleiman. And if you actually look at David Kleiman's signature, it's nothing like this one. And these are not electronically done. Apparently, this was in pen. Apparently, it was meant to be in pen, but it was like this forged signature. So this is a big issue that's coming up. So then Wright, this is where it gets really interesting. Wright accused Kleiman's counsel of committing perjury by putting this document, which is a printout of a PDF of an email, before the court. And he says, you're provably misleading the court. So then Wright tosses the document. He really says he tosses the document, and this does not sit well with the judge. She literally says, you throw another document in my courtroom and you will be in handcuffs so fast that your head will spin. So this is Judge Reinhardt, who is the one who's saying that he's potentially in contempt of court. Now, if you're at a hearing that is specifically designed just to see whether or not you're in contempt of court for not complying with court's request, and then you start throwing documents around and accusing people of perjury, like, why? Like, no rational person would behave like that. It's so crazy. Anyway, so they combed through all the metadata of the email, but Wright kept insisting, like, this is not an email, it's a PDF. And then Wright starts to say that Kleiman's counsel is trying to mislead the court. So he's saying, like, you're misleading, this is, not correct, all this stuff. But apparently the forged email in question was actually provided by Wright's team. So Wright's team put forward this document. Now Craig is trying to spin it and be like, they're committing perjury, they're misleading the court and all this. It's like, dude, your own counsel provided this document. What are you even saying? What are you even saying? All right, so then it keeps going. So Carolina Vallado says that Wright says that the document was sent by his staff. Like, this is the way he justifies it. Everything with Wright, when he gets called out, he just goes on like this spin campaign, right? So he says that his staff were at the time trying to force his company into liquidation. He says, you want me to comment on a file from a server run by a person who was trying to force me into liquidation so they could sell my intellectual property? That's his response to all of this, the fact that his side provided a document with a forged signature, and then the other side called them out on it and said, hey, this is forged. And he's like, oh, you're committing perjury and misleading it. And they're like, no, you provided that document. And then he's like, oh, yeah, it was provided by staff that had it in for me and wanted to liquidate my company. Like, he just keeps going. Anyway, so it gets even more interesting. So they start to move into a line of questioning about the trust in which Wright put his Bitcoin. So this is this infamous tulip trust. If you guys don't know what that is, basically it's the idea that all of the Bitcoins were spread across all of these different addresses. None of the public addresses were kept because they weren't meant to be kept or something. He says some bullshit. We'll get to that later. But the idea is that you could only access the information and the coins in this trust if you have all parts of this key. And apparently, like, the people who have all the parts, they're either, gone off the radar or they have passed away. But basically, he can't get those pieces anymore, is what he's saying. So, then Kleiman's counsel says a company. This is fantastic. So this is a trust, right? That all of these early Bitcoins were meant to be put into all this. So Kleiman's counsel responds and says, a company that you didn't buy until 2014 is listed as a beneficiary of a trust that you claim to have created in 2012. So wrap your head around that. He buys a company in 2014 and apparently it's named as a beneficiary of the trust that was created in 2012. So, like, who were they able to change the beneficiaries of this trust after the fact? Did they need all the keys in order to change the beneficiaries? Is he still able to change the beneficiaries? Because apparently something that didn't exist until 2 years later was then added as a beneficiary to this trust. So I'm very interested in the mechanics of how this stuff works, right? Like, maybe, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that could happen. Like, so he 2 years after this trust was created, he was able to get all of the necessary keys and all of that, but now he can't. But he won't explain how he can't, and he hasn't explained how he can't. Anyway, we'll keep moving. It's probably fine. We'll keep moving on. So again, Wright says, this keeps coming up over and over. Wright says, you have put forth documents that I don't recognize. And then Kleiman's counsel, his name's Friedman, says they're documents that you produced in discovery. So he keeps talking about these documents he doesn't recognize, and Kleiman's side keeps saying, like, they're coming from your own team, dude. Maybe you should have looked at the documents you guys submitted. It happens over and over. Carolina says it's a recurring theme. He doesn't recognize a bunch of documents. Kleiman's counsel points out each time that it was his side that was the one who produced them. So then he starts to explain the key mechanism a little bit. So Kieran's in the chat. He says, Naomi, I told you Craig Wright is a time traveler. Absolutely. Absolutely. Clearly a time traveler and the inventor of Bitcoin. I believe both of those things. So he says, he explains he needs at least 8 of 15 key slices in the right order to access the Bitcoin in his trust. So he needs at least 8 of them. Friedman then says, so who holds the 18 key slices? Wright says, I hold some. I don't know off the top of my head. So let me backtrack a little bit again. This whole hearing is about whether or not Craig has complied with court's orders to provide Bitcoin addresses. So he says he can't access these addresses because he can't access information until he has all of these key slices, right? So that's what he's been arguing. So you'd think that if he has to comply with the court's request, the first thing he needs to do is find out who holds the key slices and become acquainted with that. At least try to do it, right? And yet when Friedman says, who holds the 15 key slices, his response is, I hold some. I don't know off the top of my head. Dude, you had one job. You had one job and now you're in court because you didn't do that one job. To figure out who these key slices are that apparently exist and figure that, like, I mean, it's just like, there's so many red flags all over the place. I don't know how anyone is still duped by this man, but whatever, we'll keep going. So Friedman says, who else holds them? He responds, I haven't looked at the file. No one asked me to look at the file. No, that's exactly what people asked you to do. The judge literally asked you for the Bitcoin addresses you said you couldn't access without this data that is held by these different key slices. And then they say, so who owns the key slices that you need to access this data that we have ordered you to provide for the court? And he says, I haven't looked at the file. No one asked me to look at the file. I don't even know what to do this. I don't like yeah. Anyway, we keep going here. So the judge takes over the questioning at this point. This is what Carolina is reporting, and I'm going to move to Stephen's part to kind of wrap things after this. So judge takes over because the judge is getting pissed at this stage, all right? The judge has already told him that she's going to handcuff him in a second if he keeps throwing around documents. She's already told him, he's threatened him with being in contempt of court for not complying with the court's orders. And now she takes over, and Wright explains that he gave some keys to David Kleiman and directed him to give them to bonded couriers. And then he says that some of the keys won't be available until 2020. And this is a key component that Stephen Pally says is going to get Craig completely screwed in this. So the judge says, so since 2016, you've known that you didn't have access to these files and wouldn't have access until 2020. And you knew this on February 2019 and March 2019. Keep in mind that February and March were the dates when Craig was told he has to comply and provide these Bitcoin addresses. So again, let me just summarize for all of you what's going on here. Court says, provide us with all the Bitcoin addresses you own. Craig says, Craig doesn't do it. and doesn't explain why he can't do it to the court. And then the judge says, I'm going to hold you in contempt of court for not doing the thing that I told you to do. And he turns around and still doesn't explain. And it's not until she orders him to appear in person and they talk through this that he says, oh, yeah, some of the data needed to access it won't be available until 2020. You'd think that when the deadline came for him to provide the addresses, he would have explained, like, I won't have access to these until 2020. So she's getting pretty pissed. Carolina says that the judge didn't say any more about this, but the clear implication is that he would have, sorry, and I keep saying she, I think the judge is a man, actually. My apologies. The clear implication is that he would have liked to hear about this before today, which makes sense. You'd think he would have provided that, and his counsel would have provided that. So I'm going to move on to another thread that I've got here. Stephen Pally. And if you guys have, so Stephen Pally, he is a lawyer, and he's been commenting on the Craig Wright case for a while. And I think he's like famous for responding to this, saying like, yeah, Craig's fucked. And he just responds to that all the time. Because right now, this entire trial, this isn't about whether he's Satoshi. This isn't about proving any of that. This is literally about whether or not Craig has been in contempt of court by not providing the Bitcoin addresses that they requested he provide. And he said, no, and just didn't provide. First of all, he didn't say, to get this, when this all first happened and the first evidence had to be put forward and all this stuff, and when the court first said, give us these addresses, he didn't say, oh, I can't get the addresses until 2020. It's all held in this trust, whatever. He didn't say any of that. He said it would be unduly burdensome. And he started deflecting and making up all this other stuff. Oh, it's unduly burdensome. I can't, there's too many of them. Oh, no, I can't get access. I never kept them. I don't keep records of these things. And then now he's saying, oh, actually, it's locked away. And I can't access the information without some of these keys that won't be available until 2020. And that's stuff when you're just deflecting like that, and you're just like changing your tune every time someone asks you and like calls you out on something, and then you're like, oh, this other thing, actually. Yeah, I meant this other thing. Like, it's insane. So anyway, back to Pally, because it's really interesting. So Pally responds to this thing about like when the judge says, so since 2016, you've known you didn't have access to these files and wouldn't have access until 2020. And you knew this when we asked you to send us all these addresses. Pally responded and said, this is where the sanctions and contempt might start coming to play. Like, this seems like a real thing that will happen, that the judge is going to hold him in contempt of court because he knew all this and he didn't tell the court any of this. He made up all these other excuses and just didn't comply, and the deadlines rolled around and he just didn't do anything. So this is crazy. So Pally then reiterates, remember, this entire hearing is about whether Wright complied with discovery obligations and a court order. That's what this entire hearing about. This is not about whether he's Satoshi Nakamoto. That is a completely separate issue. It's whether or not the judge is going to hold him in contempt of court. So then Stephen goes on to say the judge is nailing down what Wright knew and when. Like, that's exactly what all of this is about. It's about figuring out what he knew and when he knew it and why he didn't provide that information with the court. So this is like, it's getting pretty crazy, right? So then Pally goes on to say, space and time are narrow in a courtroom. And that's a great point. Like, you've got to condense out, like, he's not giving the vital information right now. He's dodging every question. He's making up stuff that's going on and then changing his tune, and the court's like nailing it down. And then he's like, oh, this other thing. Like, this is a train wreck. So then Pally goes on to say my read from afar is that, as expected, Wright is fucked. And I would agree with this. It seems that it's very clear he's in contempt of court if he had all of this information and he didn't provide it to the court. Real Health News is saying hashtag free fake Satoshi. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Dear me. Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, Pelly goes on to say it's playing out pretty much as expected, and he says, because he's swearing all over the place, and I'm just reading what he's saying in his tweets. But Pelly then goes on to say, "Forgive the language, but it's hard to understand how completely fucked this guy is." So he's literally in contempt of court. I mean, what people are saying about what's going to happen with this is that Wright is going to try to settle behind the scenes because he can't comply with these things if he doesn't have access to any of these coins, and all of this is bullshit. So he doesn't want all of this stuff happening out in the open. So it's probably going to be a private settlement. But the main thing right now is whether or not he's going to be held in contempt of court, which is a really serious thing that's happening. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. So right now in Bitcoin talk, in the threads there, people are talking about this. And Stephen Pally again said, blood on the floor, this ain't going to end well for Wright. And I completely agree. Over and over when he's saying, I don't recognize these documents. And then Friedman, representing Kleiman's side, is saying, these are documents you produced in discovery. And then when they're saying, who owns the parts of the key that you need to access this? He's like, I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't look in the file. No one told me to look in the file. That's like, yes. So one thing people told you to do, they said, get these addresses, do what you need to get these addresses, and he just didn't. So it's very clear at the moment. From afar, like I agree with Stephen Pally. This guy seems like he's pretty screwed. So we keep going down. Stephen Pally then goes on to say, to put it in perspective, when you get yelled at by a federal judge and you are threatened with handcuffs in contempt hearing after a court supervised reopened depot of your lawyers and are told to instruct you to answer questions, is not going well for you. So this judge is not happy. This judge is irritated. This judge has taken over the questioning and is really trying to pin down what he knew and when. Craig is not providing good answers here. Stephen Pally then goes on to reiterate, like, I don't really care about BSV or not BSV. He has zero interest in price actions. He's just telling you that it's funny that anyone thinks this guy has a good plan. And that's the thing that's been going on. There's kind of this meme now, when he showed up at court, they showed him walking in. He has like these bright red or pink socks going on there. And everyone's like, oh, well, this is part of him playing 75-dimensional chess, because everyone keeps trying to justify all the dumb things that this guy is doing by saying, oh, no, it's part of a grand scheme. It's part of a plan. He's got it. He's really smart. He's got this figured out. It kind of seems like he's a liar that keeps getting called out. And this isn't some like smart plan. This is just a guy whose bullshit keeps getting called out. I mean, that seems like my take. And now his socks have become a meme where it's like, no, the socks are part of his 850-dimensional chess game that he's playing. And so I agree with Stephen Pally when he says, like, he's telling you, I'm just telling you, it's funny anyone thinks this guy has a good plan, because clearly the judge doesn't think he has a good plan. Clearly the judge is not impressed. Right now, the hearing, everything is still going on. I'm frantically looking to see if we have any more updates on. So apparently Carolina says that Kleiman's counsel has now rested. We're on a break before we go to redirect. This is definitely not going to be over today. She said there's going to be at least a day two. We're trying to finish up with Wright, but we'll have to come back another day for testimony from expert witnesses. So they have put forward expert witnesses that they're going to be going to. This is going to keep going here. This is intense, I'm going to go back to what PJM was saying. One of the things that's being brought up about like whether or not Craig is Satoshi is the fact that Craig was buying Bitcoin on exchanges years later. So you have to wonder, like, for a man who apparently has all of this money in a trust and has access to all of this stuff, why is he then going and buying Bitcoin on exchanges? It seems strange. Let me keep going down PJM's the explanation of all of this. It's I mean, there's a there's a lot going on here, and it's a pretty intense case that's going on. I'm just trying to find to see if we have an update from anyone else. Yeah, I think that's it for now, and we're going to have to check back in the next few days to figure out what's going on here. You've got so Crypto Brecky apparently is posting some fun memes on all of this. Yeah, that looks like this is a nice response that's in Bitcoin Talk Forum. I don't believe Craig Wright is Satoshi, but Craig Wright believes he is. He has been acting in this role for so long, he has become Satoshi, at least in his own mind. Craig is Bitcoin's the talented Mr. Ripley. I think that's pretty accurate way of saying this. So Kieran says that Craig Wright's lawyer just called out Katie. She's one of the people who has been following all this, Casey Ananina. And so I'm very interested in this. She just tweeted out, nearly got arrested for tweeting. Craig Wright's lawyer saw my tweets and reported to a judge. I've been called back to a courtroom for serious conversation about my behavior. Still have all my notes, and we are almost done for the day. Thread is coming. So this is pretty serious. You're not allowed to take your phone into these. I'm not sure whether she was taking her phone into the courtroom, but maybe she was just taking notes about this. But it seems like the Craig Wright's lawyer is not happy. I guess they're not going to be happy with anyone who's reporting on any of this, but I think that it's very interesting what's going on in there. So Katie says it's 4:10. This is 4:10 in Florida. We're still in. Craig Wright was asked to call that witness who flew from the UK and can't stay in the country any longer. We are running out of time. Interesting. She says Katie says she wishes she could cover every word, but electronic devices are prohibited in a courtroom. She is going to be making a big thread, so I'll make sure that I copy that in the link below in my video so you guys can read through all of that. But she's been taking a ton of notes, and so have other people. As again, I've been sort of summarizing a bunch of people and what they've been saying about this. We've got 22nd Century Crypto, Katie Ananina, all the threads compiled on Bitcoin Talk Forum, Carolina Bellado, Stephen Pally, PJM. These are all people who've been tweeting about this. So I'm going to keep you all posted on this. My biggest takeaway is when he says he was ashamed of my invention and he starts crying, and then on the cross-examination he just starts acting like all that. Like it's just insane. So it says, like, Katie says she's pretty impressed with the lawyer who's asking Craig Wright questions. He apparently has pretty good tech knowledge and is going through all the email metadata. That was what I mentioned before when Craig keeps going, it's a PDF, it's not email, and that you're misleading the jury and all of this stuff. They're playing with words a whole lot is the takeaway from everyone who's covering this. There's just like dodging, evasion of questions. The judge announced a 5-minute break and advised Craig's lawyers to talk to her client about the way he answers questions. So the judge is not happy. Craig has been called out on the way he's avoiding words. I mean, this is the way he's always avoided words, right? In the crypto space. Everyone asking questions, like, instead of, thank you so much, Boston, for the super chat. I really appreciate that. So everyone will ask him questions about this, and he just evades. And he's done this like as long as he's been in the spotlight, he's done this. And it's ridiculous. And I like the way the judge is calling him out on it and saying, listen, you got to control your client and talk to him about the way he answers questions. Like, he's so used to being a bullshit artist for so long that he's going into a courtroom where he's potentially in contempt of court and he's under oath and he's still doing the same thing. So the judge is not having a bar of it. And so that's pretty interesting, is like doing all these little backflips there to avoid questions. Apparently he's it's pretty interesting, his antics that he's going to. And you got to think, at the end of the day, if he wanted to prove that he's Satoshi, He's apparently signed messages in private to people without any technological knowledge before, and those people have been convinced because they didn't have any technical knowledge. But he won't do it in public where people can scrutinize and see whether or not he's reusing a message or anything like that. He won't do it. So you got to wonder about all these antics and all of these, games with words and all of this evasion that's going on. If he really wanted to prove he's Satoshi, there's a very simple way he could do it. Charlie Lee immediately, when he came out, was just like, yeah, if you're Satoshi, just prove it. And then Charlie signs this message and says, I'm Charlie Lee. It's pretty easy. It's very simple to do. And Craig knows that it's simple, but instead he says, no, I'm not going to do the easy way. I'm going to prove in a court of law, which is the legitimate way to prove this. And it's like, no, you think you're a wordsmith. You think that you're such an evasion artist. You've been called out by the judge for doing this. Your games are not going to hold up in this case. Like I'm pretty interested to see what's going to go on there. Josh, you're absolutely right. He says, Josh, who's a top developer at Coinbase, is in the thread. He says either he didn't sign for anyone or he doesn't have access to the keys. And we're trying to prove right now, what does he have access to? Because he won't provide the addresses that he has, that he owns. And apparently he doesn't own them or can't own them until 2020, if even that much is true. And apparently he says, I don't have the keys, even though I supposedly signed messages using the key for people in the past. Like, nothing he's saying makes sense. Either he does have access to, all of this data and all of this Bitcoins and everything, and was able to use them to sign messages in the past, or he doesn't have access to them and won't have access to 2020. Like, his story is not making sense. He's been called out. It's insane. Jim says the judge specifically asked if they had any objections, and they said no. They had no objections. Oh, there's weird color cycling on my feed. I think it's just because I've got a big green screen that's not doing much in the background. It's because the apartment's really messy, and I'm not going to take that down. So I'm sorry if there's color cycling there. It might just be a camera thing. That's all for now, guys. I'm going to be keeping track of everything going on. I'm going to be following Katie. I don't want her to go to jail. She's done such a great service. Thank you, Katie and Anina, for covering all of this and providing the tweets. She says she's nearly got arrested for tweeting, which is really, really scary, and I hope that she gets out all right. And I'll follow up with her and see what's going on there. Maybe follow up in private. Maybe even see if we could get her on the show to talk about this, or maybe get Stephen Pally on the show, or get some of the people who are there to kind of talk about this. But I'm gonna hop off now. That is a recap of everything we've seen at the moment. Huge thank you to Boston, the entirety of Boston, for sending me a power chat. I really, really appreciate that. That's I should say super chat. Power chat's the Bitbacker thing, and I don't think I have anything on Bitbacker, although I'm going to log in just to check. But I really, really appreciate your support there. It all goes towards helping me keep this channel going and set anything. So I'll be back later, probably this weekend sometime. I'll keep you updated on everything going on with this court case. At the very least, maybe next time I'll have popcorn ready. That would be great. Maybe we'll have a tweet watching party, because it is enjoyable just kind of watching Craig just screw up over and over. Anyway, you guys go have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your weekend, wonderful Friday. If anyone hasn't watched the weekly news show, we just filmed it just before with Kieran and Chris Karabat. So if you guys wanted to check that out, we go over all the news. We covered this story a little bit, but then we covered everything else that's going on in the news as well. It's pretty interesting stuff. So go check that out. Fortunately, it was divided into 2 segments because the stream just decided to stop in the middle, and I didn't even do anything. So I'm not sure what happened there, but it's in 2 parts. I would love it if you watch both, because then I get a view on both of them, and that would be great. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help me. And if you enjoyed this recap, then share it around. Oh, hi, Cody. I hope that you have fun on the Contra cruise. I'm so sad I'm not going to be there. But see you guys. I love you all. Bye.